This episode is presented by the Visit Cedar City Bryan Head Tourism Bureau. Discover the art of adventure at Utah's gateway to the parks. Cedar City is within a few hours' drive from 6 different national parks and monuments, and only 30 minutes from fresh snow at Bryan Head Resort. Check out visitcedarcity.com to plan your next trip. This episode is sponsored by the Cedar City Business and Innovation Center, dedicated to supporting local businesses and entrepreneurs. It provides resources and services aimed at fostering business creation, growth, and retention. The center features the makerspace, where entrepreneurs and small businesses can have access to 3D printers, video production, and photography equipment, t-shirt printing, and more. Whether you're starting a new venture or looking to expand an existing one, the Cedar City Business and Innovation Center offers the tools and guidance to help you succeed. To learn more and get involved, visit innovationcenter.cc. Hello and welcome to another episode of Explore Local Podcast, presented by Visit Cedar City Bryan Head in partnership with Cedar City Iron County Economic Development. This is produced by Dallas Smith Media, and I'm your host, David Johnson, Economic Development Director for Cedar City and Iron County. All right, and welcome. Today we have Jessica Kinsey, who's the Executive Director of SUMA, the Southern Utah Museum of Art, and Emily Ronquillo. I said that correctly, right?
Yes.
Okay, welcome. Well, why don't you guys just give us kind of high level, what is SUMA, or the Southern Utah Museum of Art?
Yeah, so SUMA actually opened to the public almost 9 years ago in July of 2016 as part of the larger project that is the Beverly Taylor Sorensen Center for the Arts, which also houses the Utah Shakespeare Festival. And we actually come from a predecessor organization, which was the Braithwaite Gallery of Fine Art, that was housed in the Braithwaite building on campus since like the late 70s. So before there was SUMA, there was an art gallery on campus. And I think some people don't necessarily know that or remember that.
Well, just for the audience, so SUMA is actually part of Southern Utah University, correct?
Yes, yeah. SUU is our parent organization, just like the Utah Shakespeare Festival.
But do you have your own like 501c3 then?
We do not, actually.
Okay, so you're under the university umbrella, like formally.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes
Wholeheartedly.
sense. Gotta love it. Well, why don't you, let's kind of start 30,000 foot level with, with kind of the whole area, like you mentioned, Shakespeare Festival, the Beverly Center. What is really SUMA's focus? If you were to break it down into your core elements or your core mission, I guess let's start off with that 30,000 foot. What's your core mission? And then maybe talk about, if you were to break it down into 3 things or 5 things that you really focus on, what are those things?
Yeah. Maybe I can talk about the mission, and Emily can kind of talk a little bit about our core values.
Sure.
But as far as our mission, it's that we want to be an educational and cultural resource. Obviously, experiential learning is at the heart of our mission because we are part of SUU, and that's at the heart of their mission. And that really we're doing those things through our growing collections, diverse exhibitions, and multifaceted experiences. So that's really kind of the outline of our mission statement.
That sounded like a formal mission statement. So yeah, you know how those go.
I've got it memorized at this point.
Well, and, I was just thinking as you were explaining that, sorry, this is digression, but I forgot to introduce what your role is, and you're the Director of Marketing and Design with SUMA, correct, Emily?
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what some of those core focuses are that you guys hone in on? And I think the mission kind of outlines that, like just saying a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's really great to have clear guiding documents, kind of informing the work that we're doing, because we are a very small team. There's only, 9, 10 of us that are non-students. Then we have a lot of student employees as well. So it's great to give them that experience, and kind of at the core of what we're doing internally, and we hope it bleeds out externally, is we're focused on belonging. So we're free, open to everyone, right? We're not just for campus. We're not just for community. We want to welcome kind of everyone, even people visiting town.
So you said free. So that means
Yes.
you anybody from the public just rolling in can go in and look at the exhibits that are existing right now.
No
charge.
admission.
Okay.
Yeah. We're really, I think, want to break down some of the stereotypes about art museums being this kind of formal place or just for the wealthy and educated. I think that historically people have seen art museums, that we really want to see the museum as a place for everyone. And so it's,
And I think Emily's role has been really important to that because of social media, that we're really trying to use our social media, Instagram in particular, to really help people see themselves in an art museum, that our content can be fun and playful, and it's not always information or feels stuffy.
Yeah.
This is meant to be a place where everyone can feel that sense of belonging and get something out of the exhibitions.
Yeah. I really love that it's free to everyone. You know, you're not walking in having to pay the admission, getting your cup of tea with your pinky in the air as you evaluate the art, you know.
Yeah.
But if you want to, bring in a cup of tea, I guess
you'll
maybe
have to leave it at the front desk.
Yeah.
No tea in the gallery.
That's right. So you have your exhibit. So continue. I kind of interjected.
Yeah,
there.
no worries. We have a lot, I think, to cover and share.
Yeah.
But I think at our core is belonging, being that space for everyone. And then our second kind of core value is curiosity. And being this place where you can explore, learn new things, like maybe you haven't experienced this type of art before. We just closed an exhibition that had 2 large installation pieces. And I don't think you typically see that in these areas. I think people come in expecting paintings, maybe landscape paintings of Southern Utah. Maybe they're tricked by the name. But we're really focused on bringing all sorts of different things and world-class art, things that you can see in LA, New York, Chicago, London, but you don't have to travel there, that we have it right here in Southern Utah. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, that's cool.
And how do we pique the curiosity of people,
Right.
And that I think as long as you're not feeling apathetic toward the artwork, then the artist has done their job. We've done our job. You don't have to like everything that you see, but if it sparks something in you, even if maybe that's more on the negative side of I don't like this or I don't understand this or whatever, as long as you're feeling something, then the art has done its job.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I lost that train of thought. Never mind.
Yeah. But curiosity.
And
I think too, like Emily was saying, maybe it's a medium or an art form that you weren't familiar with. And I think that that's what we're really trying to do is bring some balance, that there are some things that you would expect to find. Maybe that's, red rock landscape painting of Southern Utah. But that maybe there's a medium or a form of art making that you never knew existed.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't know to ask for it, right?
Yeah.
So, we try as much as we can to give the people what they want. But we also, being at a university, we want to really try to bring these interdisciplinary projects to life and really excite the faculty on campus and help get them engaged and really take learning outside of the classroom, right? That we can be this other space to expand what they're doing in a classroom setting. I think curiosity, of course, we want that for our staff. But the hope is that it bleeds out into the people that we're reaching and impacting.
Yeah.
And then all of that leads to our third core value.
Is it growth?
No.
Okay.
It's been a while. Collaboration.
We've been changing the core values.
But yes, collaboration. Obviously,
That's right.
growth is important.
Look at that. You said collaboration at the same time. You just epitomized collaboration.
So yes,
collaboration. No pressure. No pressure.
Cut that out.
It's okay. Luckily, we're not up for accreditation, so we don't actually have to be tested on this. But all of that. I think when we created these core values and updated them more recently, it was about these building blocks. So if we have a foundation of belonging and we are in this space that really appreciates curiosity, then all of that can lead into collaboration, whether that's internal collaboration with our team, collaborating with people on campus, departments, but even our community partners that we have that are so important to what we do.
Well, thanks for starting, kind of opening with that, what some of your mission and kind of vision and those core values are. But what I find, it's interesting because I've done a lot of like strategic planning and organizational management, and you always got to kind of have your mission and your goals and those core values. And typically people they're very fluffy, and then they just do random strategies and tactics that don't always necessarily tie in. And one thing that I've always really honed in on is in strategic planning and strategic plans that I've created is every strategy and every tactic. So a tactic would be, a strategy may be social media, and a tactic may be what form of social media and what medium within that form of social media, like a video campaign for a certain amount of time. People always want to jump to those tactics and never really say, well, how does this build our core values, or how does this build our mission, right?
Yeah. I think like the one thing that I want to say is what people don't really understand about the museum, I guess we don't talk about this a lot, is that, we are running a museum. And I think people assume that, oh, you need an art history degree or things like that. But really, I think a lot of the work that we're doing at that senior staff level, executive director and the directors, is that strategic planning and making sure that the work we're doing is impactful, important, and not directionless. I think that's a lot of what we're doing.
To the mission and the vision and the values. I feel like, maybe what you're alluding to is that there are a lot of organizations who have these core documents and then they just go and sit on a shelf and collect dust, and they don't actually inform the work. And I do feel proud of what we've been doing, that I feel like we reference these things on a regular basis. And we're in the middle of, going through strategic assessment to get ready for our next strategic plan. So we're kind of in between plans at the moment, but I think still trying to make sure our work is informed by those core documents.
Yeah.
We're frequently I think even just reassessing our processes and how we're planning events, how we're planning exhibitions, and making sure that it comes back to these strategies and our mission.
And who are we targeting?
Yeah,
right?
our target audiences is a big conversation we're having. So that's kind of behind the scenes. I don't think we talk about that often, if ever.
Yeah.
I think one of the keys, and this is way digression and applies broadly, of good organizational management is first, having a passion for the organization that you work for, and second, knowing who the experts are and how to bring them in to help drive your core values or your mission, right? And so, when I'm sure, and I would really love to get into this, when you're looking at your rotating exhibits and standard exhibits and things like that, you're working with these experts that maybe have degrees in art history or whatever the case might be, right? And so that's where a lot of those elements come in. So I wanted to establish the importance of kind of having those values and what your purpose is. But the truth is, the reason why so many organizations have mission creep is because the events and the community engagement and all those things, those are the fun things.
Right.
Those are the things people see. Nobody wants to talk about the academic fluff, strategic documents about your organization, right? And so it's important for you guys as managing the organization to have those fun things, those engaging things, and ensuring that those types of engaging things are feeding back into your core values, right? So that's where the next thing I want to go. So tell the public, tell our audience, what are if there were 5 elements of SUMA, exhibits, events, programs. What are those things? And
Yeah.
maybe let's kind of, let's dive into each of those a little bit. So whichever one you want to start with, let's maybe save exhibits because I want to have a longer conversation about exhibits.
Yeah.
Because for sure you have a variety of types of art exhibits. But what are some of those other elements that SUMA does that engages the public and gets them involved and helps them become more, helps art become more part of their daily life?
Well, maybe even two areas that the public might not be as aware of that are two revenue generating streams for us. Again, we don't charge admission, right?
Sure.
But we do have a membership program, Friends of SUMA. So that's a way to annually give, anywhere from $50 to $1,000, right? So there's lots of different entry points into that. And that, of course, helps support exhibitions and staffing and all sorts of things. And so that's been a really great way for people to get involved, maybe beyond just coming to an event or an exhibition. And we have some fun perks like, previews of exhibitions for our members. A few years ago, I guess about 3 years ago, we started annual director's trips. So you can travel with SUMA. And so we're working on the 2025 trip. But all of that is really centered around our membership program and how to help our members feel valued and how their gift matters, even if it's $50 a year, that still has a big impact on our small organization. The other one is our gift shop that we have, a place that is unique in Cedar City where you can buy artful, gifts or, things for yourself or your home or your kids. And I think those are two areas that people maybe are less familiar with because a lot of our attention does go to exhibitions and programming. But really, I think the best time of year to engage with our SUMA shop is around Small Business Saturday in November. We do an annual mystery discount sale. So there's
mystery discount. Does that mean?
So it's like you do your shopping and you go to the cash register and then you pull a mystery discount out of the bag. So it could be 10%, it could be 25%. We give our members a guaranteed 30% off during that week.
That would stress me out so much because I'm very much I add things up in my mind as I'm purchasing.
Yeah.
Like,
you have to be prepared.
Discount.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know. Like, this is worth it if it's 50% off, but not if it's 40% off. That's how frugal I am.
Yeah.
But that's good. I like that.
Yeah. It's fun. One year we had a wheel that you could spin and know your discount. But yeah, I think we want people to know during the year that this is a place to shop for greeting cards or unique books and notebooks and games and all sorts of things that we really have developed a great, unique museum gift shop where people can pop in even just to buy something.
Okay. Well, tell me about tell me about specific events you have throughout the year.
Yeah.
And then I do want to carry into programming, but I think before that, let's talk about events. And then I want to talk about kind of the history of SUMA, the building, and maybe the architecture.
Yeah.
And we'll get into some of those other things. But tell me about what events do you have throughout the year?
Well, I feel like there's two major events. I'll talk about our fundraiser and Emily can talk about Dia de los Muertos. But yeah, our art auction is our annual fundraiser that happens in May. So it's coming up May 10th. And that is the biggest funding opportunity for the museum.
Are they local artists?
Yeah, mostly local, regional, some from Salt Lake area. And all of the work is kind of divided into a live auction element and then a silent auction. And with the live auction, it's so fun because we have a local livestock auctioneer who comes and is selling artwork, and he does such a great job. And it's so fun because I think, as we get into this conversation a little bit more, I think that is what makes Cedar City so unique, is that there really is value for agriculture, but also the arts.
Yeah.
I've always found that to be fascinating since, before I moved here and I was, preparing for an interview at SUU. I was just really drawn to the intersection of those things. And I feel like the art auction is one of these fun events where you can experience that intersection just by having a livestock auctioneer sell off fine art. There was one year that people were bidding and the amount maybe got higher than they wanted to give. And so they started to lower their paddle and he called them out and was like, you spent more on a sheep last week. Like this is artwork. Yeah. And I was like, I love this guy. But it's true, right? You know, that we have people in our community who are buying sheep and buying art. Yeah. And they're not mutually exclusive of each other. And I feel like that is what's so unique about Cedar City. That's really fun to be a part of that.
I love that you say that, because that was one of my attractions to coming to the area. I always referred to, I like how you refer to it as the intersection of these things. I've talked about it as there's diverse opportunities and diverse things to do, but you're right. Those things really do intersect. Like, I really love the outdoors. I really love the arts. I love my job, what I do in business recruitment. I love kind of the small town feel, but I like the collaboration in the area. And so I like how you phrase that with the intersection of these things. And that's what's really great, is they kind of meld together and they're not mutually exclusive. Yeah. And it's such a fun way to show that. You, like you said, you've got these farmers and you have these, and you have people that are in the arts, and you do think of them as kind of two separate areas, but They're not. Yeah, not at all.
Yeah, they blend really beautifully here.
And I love that you did that with the auctioneer from the livestock.
Yeah, it's incredible.
I didn't know that. I'll have to try to go.
Yeah, you gotta buy a ticket before it sells out.
Oh,
but
okay, I better. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think when I first moved to Cedar City in 2017, because I came at the 1-year anniversary of SUMA, is when I began. And, friends would ask me, what is Cedar City like? And, what do you think? And I'm like, look, I went to a Shakespeare play, the first week of October. And now the last weekend of October, I'm watching all of these sheep go down Main Street. Like, this is the most magical place ever. Yeah. Where else do you get to do that? And I really can't think of another place.
Yeah. And then a month from then on Main Street, we have our holiday lighting with fireworks, to kind of kick off the holiday season, Christmas season. So it's just fun.
Every year I'm like, in November, am I hearing fireworks?
Yeah, I know.
I always forget.
I joke that it's like a Hallmark movie or something, but
totally.
Yeah, it's fun. Well, that's awesome. And you said there was one other event too.
Our other major event.
Yeah, our other major event is the first week of November, and that's tied to Dia de los Muertos, which is Day of the Dead. Which is a traditionally Mexican holiday, where we honor our ancestors. I think that's another thing kind of about this town. People want to honor where they came from, their roots, the people that came before them. And so we found it's a really great way to bring all of these different communities together at the museum, at the Beverly Center, or even onto campus, depending on, we've gone through many iterations of this event. We have a big Saturday celebration that has ballet folklorico, which is like traditional dancing from Mexico, mariachi band, free pan de muerto. We have a huge community altar. I think that, to me, is the centerpiece of this event. We call it Dia de los Muertos Festival of Altars, because the altar, the ofrenda, is that kind of core of Day of the Dead, and where you're putting an image of, loved ones that have passed away. And also like offerings. There's traditional items that you put on there to help them pass back to our world, like is kind of the, trying to phrase this well, but it's like kind of those 2 days. The belief is that their spirits can come be with us on earth. And so
So yeah, having things for that passage like salt,
water, marigolds, butterflies, all of these things, candles have.
Even like favorite food that maybe that loved one.
Yeah.
Favorite food, toys,
tequila,
drinks, bottles of Coke. We've really created this beautiful installation that we're asking for photos from our community members, and we've grown it. We keep all the photos and we put them up year after year, and then it grows every year. So I think we're at about 400 photos of, people from our community and people that mean something to the people in our community.
Yeah.
So they're able to come visit, and then they're also able to add names if they didn't get a photo in before we install it. But that's usually up for about 2 to 3 weeks around the event.
Yeah.
And that's really important.
Yeah. And cool. I mean, this is something that SUMA started hosting in 2018. It had already taken place on campus in a few iterations and had sort of outgrown those spaces. But I think we had no idea the potential for this. So in 2018, I'm thinking 150 people will show up, and 1,100 people showed up. And that's when we realized, oh my gosh, like there's so much potential for this to be more of a block party,
So did you find that like the attendance was primarily like kind of the Hispanic community, or was it a good mix, or what would you say?
I mean, I feel like it's grown to 50-50. I feel like I would say about 50% probably, Spanish is or could be their first language. Yeah. But that we still get a lot of people from the community, maybe even like members of the LDS church, like Emily's saying, it's all about ancestors and honoring those ancestors. And I think that's an area that is a common denominator. Yeah,
kind of that intersection you were talking about. Yeah,
in celebrating Day of the Dead. And I feel like, how I was raised and, the culture I sort of grew up in, we don't have anything like this. And I think other people are like me and are interested in something that can honor those ancestors and just remember them, right? We think of maybe Memorial Day, but sometimes that feels like we focus on the veterans in our family. And so this does feel, even for our pets, every year I add pictures of past cats and dogs. And so it's just a great, again, a celebration of life, even though it might feel like from the name Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, that actually this is about remembering these people in a really special way.
Yeah, it's very colorful. I think it does strike that core value of curiosity. People do come to learn. And what I really love about this event is that you're seeing multi-generational families.
Yeah.
You're seeing babies, toddlers, young kids there with their parents and their grandparents, and they're all coming together to learn and experience, the museum and this cultural event in a new way.
Yeah. I can't talk about Day of the Dead without acknowledging, and hopefully this doesn't sound minimizing to Day of the Dead, but the movie Coco and Disney.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite movies. And it does such a fun job of kind of explaining that culture and why it's celebrated and on all of that.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. And I think maybe because of that film, more people are interested in this.
Better understand. And I went to high school in a border town in Arizona. And so I was very acclimated kind of with some of the Hispanic culture, but I never fully understood it actually until that movie. So it was interesting.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I want to dive in now. The building at SUMA is such a beautiful building. It's so unique. The architecture is awesome. And when you kind of walk up the steps, and there's those lights, especially in the evening, it just looks like little, I assume it's supposed to look like stars twinkling, in the night. But tell us about the building and the architecture and dive into that. And there's a cool sculpture garden on the outside. Yeah. Maybe dive in and tell a little bit about those things.
Yeah, I think Cedar City is very lucky to have this building.
It blew me away when I drove down
It's incredible.
Center.
Yeah. And for me, when I was researching the university and the museum, when I was applying for the job and interviewing for the job, I had pictured certainly the Braithwaite Gallery, the predecessor. I thought, oh, this is probably going to be kind of a small gallery in an academic building. And then I, Google image search Southern Utah Museum of Art and thought, oh my gosh, this is incredible. I could go to work there every day. I think we are really lucky. And again, maybe similar to art itself, if it evokes something, then you're at least noticing the building. Not a lot of people necessarily like the building, but
I felt like when I first saw it, because I love art and always have, when I first saw it, I'm like, that building is a work of art.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so cool.
It is.
Yeah, it may not be your cup of tea on a building, but I mean, for what it's housing, it's spot on.
It is spot on. And you could plop that building down in LA or Chicago and it would make sense. It wouldn't be out of place. But I think what makes it so special, a couple of things. One is that the shape and that swoop is inspired by local slot canyons that are so well known for Southern Utah. So
I love slot canyons. That is cool to know.
And I think once people learn a little bit more about the inspiration and how it is meant to connect to our area, then they soften a little bit on the aesthetics, but I think this stark white building, and then you have that red hill behind it. It is just so stunning. And I feel like we, over the years, have gathered more and more photographs of different seasons, SUMA in the seasons,
What's
rainbows.
interesting too, it like changes colors, that white, like you have all these different shades of white and gray, but depending on the sky, sometimes the building looks pink, blue, at nighttime. It's really versatile and it's really cool.
Really incredible. And so on that plaza, the Sam and Diane Stewart Family Foundation Plaza that you mentioned as you're kind of coming up the steps, we've really tried to activate that space since I began. So we now have a sculpture installed on that space. And right now it rotates. But then even just adding the table and chairs, that SUMA then became this third space for people. And it's amazing when the weather is nice. I feel like I see more students and faculty out there with their laptops, and it's just a great place. That doesn't, you don't have to be there for any specific reason other than I don't want to be at work and I don't want to be at home. And then,
just sitting outside.
It's amazing.
When you sit there and you see the red hill, and which the generational locals love the red hill. It's just a symbol of where they're from, right? And I love the thought that the building is kind of like a slot canyon, but the contrast that it gives, it actually helps. If you're at the building, it accents that red hill and helps it stand out more.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. And then you guys also have like a sculpture garden on the outside.
Yeah.
What's that? There's a name for it.
Yeah.
Right?
So to the east of the building, it's the Stillman Sculpture Court.
Okay.
And so again, that was part of the creation of the museum. And it started with 3 sculptures. And I guess now we have 7 in that space, and have really been able to landscape it. And again, I think what I wanted to bring when I started to the gallery space, which we can get into more as we talk about exhibitions, but is creating these moments of discovery. So you don't just walk in the front door and you see everything. You actually are pulled in and you want to kind of see what's around that corner. Same thing with the sculpture garden. When I first began, it did feel just like an open lot, and with some sculptures kind of plopped down, right?
Yeah.
And I really wanted to bring in pathways. I wanted to make it more accessible, and again, sort of create this environment where it's going to pique your curiosity. You want to spend time there. You want to contemplate, life. It doesn't even have to be art.
It's just kind of a peaceful place.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell me a little bit about some of the sculptures that are in there. What's like maybe your favorite sculpture or favorite stories behind?
Well, the one I'm most proud of is the Allen Hauser. It's called Raindrops. So it's the one of a singular woman who's kind of looking up to the sky. And there's a sheep at her feet. So again, I think number one, when I'm thinking about bronze sculpture and our sculpture court, I really wanted an Indigenous artist represented. And when I think of that, I think of Allen Hauser, who is the Native American bronze sculptor, known internationally. So for me, it was go big or go home.
Yeah.
and I knew that he had a lot of work that included sheep. And so I thought this is such a great way, again, of blending our community.
Yeah.
That we have these Indigenous, ancestors, the Southern Paiute people. How can we honor them? And then we have agriculture and ranching and descendants of these pioneers. So how do we bring the communities together in one piece of sculpture? And I think what was incredible and really meaningful for me is that became true with the fundraising for this piece. Everyone was contributing to that. It wasn't just the Stillman family or Southern Utah University. It was also Iron County and the Cedar Livestock and Heritage Group and the Cedar Band Corporation. Everyone contributed to make that piece possible for the museum. And so when you're walking through that space and you look at the label, you see a long credit line. And I think that's a testament to the fact that we did choose a good piece that everyone felt they could connect to. There was an entry point for everyone. And I think that's when art is most successful. So that piece for me is obviously near and dear to my heart because Allen Hauser was born in Oklahoma. I'm from Oklahoma. You see his work everywhere.
Which part of Oklahoma are you from?
I was born in Oklahoma City. I worked in Norman at the University of Oklahoma. But yeah, I mean, the top of the state capitol has one of his sculptures.
Yeah,
his work is on a license plate, So to bring a little piece of Oklahoma to Cedar City in the sculpture court, obviously, I enjoy seeing every day. Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, you had me think of a lot of things. One of the things actually you made me think of is our library director for Cedar City. He actually tracks all art in public spaces in the whole city.
Yeah, and I think the whole county.
Is it the whole county?
It's the whole county. Yeah, Steve has a database for the whole county.
Yeah, there's so many cool pieces of art, which again you would never expect in what historically has been this rural community, right? But there's just such a vibrant downtown area between, our historic downtown, Shakespeare, the university, even City Hall's right there downtown. It's so cool to have this art that comes around. In fact, there's a piece of art right out, or a sculpture right out of City Hall. Every time I step out, I always have to, it always start. I'm not very easily startled, but it always freaks me out because I think somebody's standing. Right
the statue's on Main Street. I often am like, is someone trying to cross the road? Oh wait, no, that's a statue.
But it's so cool to think that we have art like that here. I think that's absolutely awesome. Now, when I first got here, and I don't know if it's changed yet, and I'm kind of diving into the exhibits now. Well, you know what? Actually, before I dive into the exhibits, tell me a little bit, how long has the building been there now? Has it been there 9 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, just about. So like this July, it will be 9 years since it opened to the public. Yeah.
Okay. And was it built the same time as the Beverly Center as well?
Yes. So that's, again, just an incredible accomplishment for Southern Utah University, especially if we go back to 2016, think about how much smaller SUU was at the time.
Right.
That they fundraised for and had construction of and opened this space all simultaneously. I mean, this was a $40 million project. It's just incredible that really the only building that was there previously at the center is the Randall Jones Theater.
Right.
So that one predates everything else, but
it just opened up the whole downtown really, and just kind of added that vibrancy, I guess, if that's a word. Well, tell me now what when I got here, sorry, now I'm going back to what I was originally saying. When I got here, there was an exhibit on architecture, actually. So it's interesting. We were just talking about the architecture of the building. Has that rotated through, or is that one still on display right now?
That one rotated through. So exhibitions, we rotate about 3 times a year.
Okay.
Kind of our main heavy rotation times are May and late September, early October, and then March.
Right.
So
one of the things that I found interesting in that exhibit was there was actually a lot about local architecture. There's definitely some Frank Lloyd Wright-ish type styles. Frank Lloyd Wright in the woods, his like waterfall.
Falling water.
Falling water is that. Like that one's beautiful because of the surroundings. But I actually blame Frank Lloyd Wright for all the ugly 80s flat roofed buildings, and 70s flat roofed buildings. But sorry, that's kind of a negative direction. But
on a personal note for you. But
Frank Lloyd Wright definitely had influences in a lot of places. And I was it was very interesting to me to see some of those influences in local architects here and some of the architecture here. There's other little architectural features here, like even the high school has kind of like the these zigzag roof lines. And so I've noticed some of the buildings throughout town have some of those zigzag roof lines. So it was kind of cool to see that tie. I don't know if there's things you want to add about that exhibit specifically.
Well, I think that, so you must have come between October 2023 and early March 2024.
That's right around,
Yes, because that was when we had both the Brutal DC exhibition and the Robert Gardner exhibition. And I think that's such a good example of our vision statement that we are trying to become this space that brings these global perspectives to a local community. So that was tying in architecture, both locally with a global movement of brutalism.
And explain brutalism, because I had to educate myself, and this exhibit helped educate me on that.
Yeah. Well, that, kind of thinking about Washington, D.C., I think has a lot of examples of brutalism and that it's mostly around material, concrete. I think
it's the very kind of raw materials type of architecture, right?
Yeah. And obviously it's called brutal for a reason, right? Like not just the materials. I think there's
almost
French.
harsh
the
look
word
about
comes from brute, which is French for like concrete.
Yeah.
Really?
No, not concrete. Raw.
Yeah.
Okay.
So raw materials.
Yeah. But it also sort of embodies this brutal feeling, right? That it can be intimidating or, monumental. And that we have examples of it on campus. I mean, that's what was so great about connecting these dots. And Robert Gardner, in 1948, when he opened his architecture firm in Cedar City, it was the only one between Las Vegas and Salt Lake City.
Oh, really? Wow.
And he, born and raised in Cedar City, went to MIT, and the auditorium across the street from SUMA was his thesis project.
Wait, the auditorium across from SUMA was his thesis project?
Yes.
That is so cool.
Yeah. So really incredible. And then, you look at Cedar High, like you're talking about, also several of the elementary schools.
Yeah.
Those were all done by Robert Gardner. The church, unfortunately, that they tore down just south of campus, that was a Robert Gardner design. So you could see these prints, his blueprints in the exhibition because they all belong to SUU Special Collections. So just again, we're trying to find those ways of connection and points of entry. So if you are local, we had people come in that lived in some of those homes that were featured in the exhibition, or they knew Robert Gardner.
That's cool.
So yeah, that really personal connection. And then maybe you then learned something about brutalism in DC that you didn't know about. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely learned a bit. I like I said, kind of similar to Frank Lloyd Wright. And I think there's some genre-ish overlap between this, at least in styles of the brutalism and Frank Lloyd Wright. And I don't necessarily like the architecture that's like the raw materials type architecture. I kind of like the classical architecture that you see. But it was so cool. I just found a broader or a deeper appreciation of these architects and maybe some of the stories behind why they do, they designed these things or these buildings in these different ways. It was interesting to me. Maybe I'm nerd like that, but I don't know. I just love museums and art.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point of how we have this local architect in Gardner who clearly had influences from Frank Lloyd Wright with the flat roofs, which I don't mind. I like those angles.
A lot of people do.
But the carport, Frank Lloyd Wright is the one who invented the carport. And the idea was that you shouldn't, drive home and drive straight into a garage and go straight into your house and not experience nature and the outdoors. So that's why we have the carport. And I think that especially in a place like Cedar City that's so beautiful, I know when I get home, I can pull into my carport and I can see the mountains. I see even the sea trail, especially now that the sea is lit up. I can see it at night. I think that's a nice little nod to Frank Lloyd Wright, especially in a place like this that is so beautiful.
Yeah, and that's part of what fascinated me so much about it, is that just the local influence and the way you were talking about this local architect kind of reminds me of the way people also talk about Fred Adams with the Shakespeare Festival, right? Yeah. Just this connection, and they know this individual, and you can see the I guess the ripple effects from that individual.
Yeah.
So then the next exhibit that you had, has it rotated twice since the architecture one?
Yes.
Okay.
A few times.
There was one I remember, and maybe this was the architecture one. I just remember reading various stories, like wartime almost stories. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Was that?
Probably you're talking about The Past is Present, Art in Times of Crisis.
Yeah.
That was up during our summer rotation last year in 2024. And featured two artists. So one global, a contemporary Tibetan artist who's based in China, Gongar Gyatso. And then that was paired with an artist in St. George, who's originally from New York, Stuart Seidman. So again, global, local. And really, it started as thinking about post-COVID-19 and the pandemic. But then it really did morph into pop culture, current events, how I think we live in a world where, something is happening across the globe and then something else is happening across another part of the globe. And then things fizzle out, but you know that these things are still relevant. Maybe we're not talking about them anymore. So that show in particular, and it probably is Stuart's work that you're referring to, was not just about COVID-19, but was also about the war in Ukraine. And then there was also one painting about what's happening in between Gaza and Israel. And so, a really heavy exhibition, but one that is meant to remind us that the past is still in the present, that these things are still happening, even if we're hearing about it less. And of course, it ebbs and flows, right? Now Ukraine is back in the news and headlines. Maybe it had kind of fizzled out for a while and you didn't hear about it, but something's going on. So, and I think using, again, art as an unexpected medium or a platform for communicating these larger issues, political issues, that again, maybe we're inundated with news and data and statistics. So what does it mean to look at something visually and feel maybe the pain or the suffering that's happening?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
One thing that I was just thinking about as you're talking about both the exhibits is, so I did grant writing for a while and fundraising for kind of a campus of local museums. And I was always fascinated by the museum directors and their coordination of getting the exhibits. Can you guys maybe talk to us about what that takes? And then I have a random little story I'm going to tell you about that too. But
Yeah. I mean, obviously it takes a village. I feel like when I first started, I was director and curator. Those are two very big roles for one individual. So I'm really grateful that we had a director of curatorial affairs position that we were able to add thanks to the Diane and Sam Stewart Family Foundation.
Now explain the difference between director and curator for those that don't know.
Yeah. So director, I would say like executive director, that role, you're more of the operations, the logistics, a lot of people managing, things like that. And then on the curator side, your focus is the artwork, what's happening in the gallery. Also, what are some of those collections management projects that need to happen behind the scenes? And so we're really lucky to have Dr. Rebecca Bloom, Becky, our curator. And so I would say when she first started, which was almost 3 years ago, which is insane to think that she's been there that long, she was kind of carrying out some of what I had already committed SUMA for. So she inherited, some projects.
You have to plan this out
as much as you can. Yeah. Especially if you're going to rely on loans, especially museum loans. Often museums, you have to ask them a year in advance. If you want to borrow something.
Yeah, so, and when you say loans, you're not talking about financial, you're saying a loan from another museum.
Yeah, borrowing a painting or a sculpture, some type of object. But yeah, so when she first came, she had to really carry out some projects for the museum. But I think that the Past is Present, the show last summer, is a good example of one that she brought to the table, that she brought to life, that was really her vision. And then the show that we just closed, Salt Lines, exploring climate, environment, and the saline influx. That was another one that she started to piece together this theme through artists either that had approached us about a project or that she knew from her undergrad program. So yeah, it's often, we might take inspiration from a theme. We might want to be responsive to something that's happening currently. I feel like going back to our architecture, to me, our building just feels like it houses contemporary art. It's a very contemporary building. And I really appreciate working with contemporary artists because I think, number one, you get more in their own words. Like, we're not dealing with an artist from the 1800s that we're trying to decipher and make up something.
That always cracks me up when I see like old art found. I read an article the other day of some, I don't know, pieces that were unearthed, and they were like, they were just pontificating on what spiritual connection this could have had. And maybe they're right, but I'm like, how do you really know that?
That's PhD in art history.
Right, exactly. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, but it's interesting. But I think working with
the living
artists and contemporary artists, it just provides a lot of opportunity. And of course, sometimes it can be more challenging. But I think the payoff is so incredible, especially, again, being at a campus museum where there's an art program. How do we help ignite creativity and passion in students who are studying filmmaking, art, and design at SUU? And I think you do that best when they can connect and see what's happening in the art world in the 21st century. And I think the other outcome of that is that contemporary artists are dealing with contemporary issues. So you do have things that are that are maybe more challenging. But again, kind of going back to that idea of visual art can be a better entry point than maybe the news or data or statistics, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that you look at, well, one of the things I was going to say a second ago was art often can be politically driven. And you look at political cartoonists. Yeah. I mean, those are the original memes, right? You know, and one little political cartoon can say so much more than volumes of articles about an issue, or someone's opinion on that issue, right? And you don't have to agree with it to necessarily appreciate their creativity. So years ago, I always wanted to go into like politics, and I learned very quickly that I didn't want to be the politician. But I still wanted to contribute to the community, right? But I always joked that if I ever became a politician, I would collect any and all political art, you know, like cartoons about myself, because positive or negative, because there's something to appreciate about the perspective that's communicated through that art. Yeah. And definitely on the exhibit, and thanks for reminding me of what that exhibit was, where it highlighted stuff about COVID and Ukraine. And not everybody necessarily might agree with what was expressed. Or you may, and what I find often in art is it gave me a perspective I hadn't thought about. You know, like I thought about, you know, COVID maybe in this certain way. And I had heard perspectives in this way, but I never really understood what they meant until you saw this piece of work that kind of conveyed that to them. Anyways, so I'm blabbing a little bit. One of the things I was curious about is you have some temperature controlled environments within the museum.
Yeah.
Talk about that. What's
in
that
theory? For? No.
Very important for the artwork.
Yeah.
Especially when we want loans, right, for museums. So we do have a pretty state-of-the-art facility. I feel like our mechanical room, it feels like you're, you know, going on to a submarine or something. It's it's crazy back there. But lots of, you know, humidifiers and climate control, you know, temperature, those things. So
we
temperature.
have this area where it's behind glass and there's
so that's like our visible storage. No, So you actually can't see the mechanical room from any of the public spaces. But yeah, what you're referring to is our visible storage. So you can kind of see where some of the staff work, our preparator, our, you know, kind of registrar roles.
Right.
And then beyond that is the vault. So that's all art storage primarily.
So what's the difference? So is any of that storage climate controlled, or is the climate controlled elsewhere?
Yeah, the whole building is climate controlled. And has certain meters for letting us know what the humidity is, the temperature. You know, in a museum, you have these best practices that you follow, where you don't really want your humidity going over a certain percentage or under a certain percentage. So that's one thing that we're working on right now, is that we applied for a grant in January because we don't have a way to dehumidify our building. So when the building was constructed and built, the idea was we're in Cedar City.
It's a dry climate.
It's dry. We're only going to need to add humidity. We're never going to need to take it And turns out
here in August.
Yes. Well, turns out during monsoon season, the humidity spikes way, way above the set point, essentially. So we're working on, we've applied for a grant. We'll see what happens, but to put in basically a dehumidification system that will dehumidify the entire building. Because it's not just about collection storage, and it's not just about the gallery. So obviously gallery is important when you're talking exhibitions. The vault and storage is important when you're talking about your collection, which our collection is a state asset, and we want to protect it for future generations. So so that's the next big goal building wise as far as capital projects.
Gotcha. there's two random stories I just got to blab on the podcast here. So one of my favorite things about art, an abstract art isn't my favorite thing, but something I learned about it. One of my favorite things about art is I drew and I did all kinds of, this whole spectrum of the arts I've always enjoyed. And one of the things that surprised me is abstract art. A lot of times, people picture and they see the videos of somebody just throwing paint on a canvas and say, oh, that's not art, or some like the banana duct tape on the wall, whatever. But what's interesting to me about abstract art is if you look at even classical art, we'll go with just paintings, and you look and you're up close to it, it's all abstract. Those brushstrokes are so abstract. It's when you step out and you see, and I love some of the art. I've seen these exhibits where it's just a bunch of junk or toys of a certain color. And when you step back or look at a certain angle, and I forget what this type of art's called, when you look at it from a certain angle, it forms like a 3D bird or something like that. Yeah. It's fascinating to me. And so whenever I hear people kind of, not love abstract art, I talk a lot about how, well, it depends how you're looking at that. Because if you look at, like, for example, those 3D things where it's just junk, all of us have experienced looking at a cloud and being like, oh, that looks like, a dog or whatever. Yeah. And to me, that's kind of what some of these abstract arts are expressing in some ways. There's other means and purposes behind that. But one of my favorite things about art, which is horrible, so I love it when some museums allow this, texture plays such a role, especially in paintings, of the shadowings. Like a print of some paintings, it adds the shadowing, but when you look at the authentic painting itself, you're like, oh, that shadowing is caused by the texture of that brush stroke there. And this is horrible. And I don't do it on museums or where you're not allowed to, but I love to touch the texture. Yeah. There's something about that. And there's some museums that very much have exhibits that encourage that
that are specific to that tactile learning.
Yeah, exactly. And that's horrible but every time I've been to, Smithsonian places, and I haven't touched them at the Smithsonian, just to make that clear, but I just want to. I want to see the tactile of it. And maybe that's a weird
you're not alone.
About myself, I'm sure. Yeah.
Lots of people want to touch the art, and most of them do. And we have to remind them, please don't. Touching harms the art.
Yeah. What I think what's great about what we're offering, though, is that we now have gallery backpacks, like activity backpacks that are put together by our learning and engagement team, that a lot of time they're updating them. There are some just like standard things in there, but they're updating them for each specific exhibition. So you do have that chance to have that tactile experience. Like I know one time we had tapestries on display. So they had a whole like loom weaving kit. So you can check out this backpack and practice weaving ribbon in and out of it to kind of give that extra element. I think it's like the primary audience, maybe children, but I think adults can also get a lot out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Adults also want to touch and, Well,
when I was in college, and I think this is when I first realized how texture plays such a role in kind of the shadowing. Cause I've done drawings my whole life. It's less so as I've gotten older with kids and life. But paintings and things, but I was in this like business building, and there was this extreme textured kind of painting. And I'm like, I have got to go touch that painting. And I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to, but I am going to. And maybe it was just the child in me coming out. So it's cool to hear that you have that. What did you call them there? Kits?
Like, activity backpacks, gallery backpacks.
And is that something you purchase or you check them out?
Yeah, you just borrow them while you're at the museum. Again, great for kids, especially younger kids. But even like some of our exhibitions, like last summer, at the same time of the Past is Present, we had a Bertoia exhibition, which again was kind of this mid-century modernist, more like furniture design and things like that. But he created these sound sculptures. And so we did have a couple of them off to the side that you could touch, that you could experiment with and play with, because you couldn't touch the other ones. But then you could ask our staff to demonstrate how these sound sculptures worked. So yeah, I think, whether it's the backpacks or, even we often will have gallery activities set up at a table or a response area where you can write or draw and leave, this behind. We do try to have something that is participatory.
Yeah. So Emily, tell me about you're the director of marketing and design. What does the design part mean?
Yeah, well, I think that's another aspect that people don't think about a lot. I think it's easy to think of marketing. Okay, we're designing advertisements, posters, things like that. But our design team is also creating exhibition identities. So each exhibition, we want it to have its own unique graphic identity for it. So people understand what this is about. It then informs our marketing, things like that.
Graphic identity in the advertising, like the branding of the exhibition
space.
But also in the exhibition.
So you're actually talking about almost like an interior design type element
like
to
picking the colors or like creating a word mark or a logo type for the entry graphic. So what does that look like? All of the text panels in there. So there is that consistency. And so each exhibition has its own identity. We're not leaning on our museum brand for exhibitions because we want people to understand, that these are different. They have different moods, flavors. So I oversee, in addition to the marketing team, so the social media, the advertisements, the email campaigns, newsletters, a team of graphic designers. And we've been really lucky with the students we've had. So they're all students studying graphic design at SUU. And we've had a really talented bunch. Just every year, I'm like, it's not going to get better than this. And then it does.
You get blown away every time.
We have a really, really great group of students studying graphic design at the university. And they're also eager to learn. And I think that's really, at the core of what I love about working at an academic art museum is being able to train the next generation of museum professionals, art lovers, that they're also able to take what they're learning in the classroom and then they come to work. And I'm like, well, here's your creative brief. We're going to meet with the director. We're going to meet with the curator. They're going to tell us what they think the exhibition is about. And now you're going to sketch all these ideas of how you're going to interpret that graphically, and to be able to mentor them and kind of guide them through that process has been really fun, rewarding.
Well, one thing that I going back a half step to what you were talking about of the design of the exhibit space, designing that, when you were talking about, I think you said something about the words on the wall or something.
The text panels.
That is one of the most, you don't consciously think about it, but that's one of the things I actually love the most about museums is kind of how the exhibit is presented in unique ways. Do you have like a favorite exhibit that you've done in the style of it? I don't know. I'm just pulling that out of the hat.
There's so many.
Whether it's your own or other museums, either of you that you've been to, or how they've kind of presented the exhibit.
I do. That is one thing about this job is that anytime I'm on vacation, I will visit a museum and I will take photos, but it's never of the artwork. It's of the entry graphics. Yeah. I'm picking up every pamphlet, brochure, rack card, because I just want to see, one, what they're offering, and two, what their design is. But that's fun. Yeah. I'm trying to think what.
Yeah.
I'm blanking. There's so many to choose from.
I mean, I think a couple that come to mind for me. One is the Bertoia.
DJ did an incredible job.
What did you guys do with that one?
You want to talk about that?
Yeah. I think what was fun about this one is I kind of assigned this to our graphic designer at the time. His name's DJ Wilson. And I said, here's some artworks that you can look at. but I don't think we had an official meeting with the curatorial team yet, and or trying to play with, because we also want to think about how does this work with the other exhibits in the gallery, but also make sure people know that it's two distinct exhibitions, that you've left this space and you're now in a new exhibition, because we have movable walls, right?
Yeah, it's a really
not
porous space. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not set in standard. You're not going from room to room. It's one giant room, and then we're creating different layouts depending on what we need. And what he came back with, one, we were working with HB Workplaces, who sponsored the exhibition, and were able to meet with their creative director of marketing, to offer that outside mentorship for design, and help influence kind of what they're doing, their furniture. And then, he proposed a couple ideas of colors and things. And we said, all of this works. And then it kind of took the next step. We're like, okay, here's the logo for this exhibition. And now how does this apply to the entry graphic? And he comes up to me, he goes, I really want these like dangling letters, acrylic panels. And I go, okay, how? Research this. How are we going to do this? How much is this going to cost? What do you need to do? How are you setting up your files? Where are you producing them? And he did all that research and was working with a space on campus, a maker space, and was able to get that experience, that
Did
production
3D
side.
print
These ones weren't 3D printed.
Laser cut or something like that?
Yeah, these ones were
acrylic,
laser cut out of acrylic, and then had holes, and then we hung them with fishing line.
Vinyl on the wall.
Yeah.
And then out from that, it are hanging these, acrylic letters.
Oh, cool.
Because Bertoya was working both in a 2D platform and a 3D platform.
Oh.
And so it just really embodied and really set you up for the work you were going to see.
It brought movement to the open thing. It was fun to see that change throughout the day, depending on where the sun was hitting it. So I think that was just a really great experience to, one, not only are these students creating these museum exhibition like identities, their work is in this museum, but then getting that additional production side of it or mentorship from other outside and professionals is great. Yeah,
the opportunity to be creative and bring their own ideas, that it's not us saying, here, do X, Y, Z, and this is exactly how we want it. That, again, kind of going back to the core values, it's very collaborative process.
Yeah. My vision and kind of my role as really the creative director, I'm kind of the middleman between what the curatorial team is asking, like taking the work that they've done, the text panels that they've written, the artworks they've selected, and then translating that with the designers. But I'm never coming top down saying, I'm not coming into the meeting saying, these are my sketches. This is what I want you to do. Now open InDesign, Illustrator, and just do it. I'm brainstorming with them. We're working through this process, and they're able to bring their ideas. And as much as I can, I want to say, let's figure it out. Let's make it work. And really, I don't really say no. I think there was one exhibit that was there were historical photographs about the march from Selma, the civil rights movement, and that entry graphic, the designer at the time, Ellie Prisbrey, said, what if we found a typeface that was by a Black type foundry that was modeled after these posters from these historical posters from this movement. So that really informed the identity. But then when it came to the wall graphic, it was like, what if we covered this wall in posters? So we printed all these posters ourselves. We had 4 different designs. And then we made our own wheat paste with a little bit of added borax to deter the ants. We worked with the curatorial team to make sure that all of that would work. And we pasted all these posters onto the wall. And then 4 months later, had a fun time taking them down.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But we want things to be fresh, different, and to have these students, have, some ideas they can work with.
Yeah. And put into practice what they're learning in the classroom. So again, this sort of theory in the classroom and then practice in this workspace that is SUMA,
Well, something I thought of and I kind of want to wrap up with, and as I'm telling this other little random story, maybe similar things might come to your mind. But when I was a kid, my dad had this t-shirt, just a mustard yellow shirt, and it had a silhouette of something Egyptian, which I later learned was actually King Tut. And I had that shirt my whole life. I don't know where my dad got it from or whatever. I had it my whole life. And then one day, we've been all about simplifying and getting rid of stuff. And I mean, this was probably 10 years ago or something. I'd had the shirt for, 25 years, longer, 30 years. And I'm like, it's time to just get rid of this old raggedy t-shirt. And then like literally 6 months later, my dad starts talking about how when he was a kid, there was an exhibit came through where it was King Tut's tomb. And he got this little t-shirt. And I'm like, oh, I just threw away that t-shirt. But what stood out to me, because he'd never spoken about it my entire growing up, adulthood, but how vividly he remembered that exhibit and the impression that it made on him, which it added only to my guilt of getting rid of that t-shirt. And he all of a sudden had this revival of interest in Egyptian things. And have you ever seen what type of cool experiences have you had personally, or have you seen with those who have come and seen the exhibits? And the reason why I'm asking this is the real why of why SUMA exists, is the experiential part for people. So I don't know if there's cool examples that you can think of.
Well, I think for me on a personal level, I grew up going to the Indianapolis Children's Museum. So my parents didn't necessarily instill in me a value of art or art history. But they certainly would take us to this children's museum because we could run wild, get our energy out. There were lots of things to touch and interact with. And we went there all of the time. And I think that coupled with, field trips in elementary school, going to the Idle-Jorg Museum of Native American and Western Art, which is also in Indianapolis. Those were really pivotal, or what word am I trying to think of here?
Impactful, pivotal.
Yeah, pivotal. Moments for me as a kid, and being in these museum spaces. And I think that definitely instilled in me this interest in creating those opportunities. And I've thought about this a lot lately, just because the world is chaotic and crazy, and I feel like it gets more chaotic and more crazy every day. And I really see the work that I'm doing, that SUMA's doing, that we're able, like for me, it's personally an escape from that chaos. And so how can also SUMA become this space that is an escape for our community, for our campus, that you can kind of take a break from the noise and be in an art museum space, or be in the sculpture garden, or be on the plaza, and have that moment, right, of contemplation, or again, just quiet.
Meditation.
And take a break from whether it's classes and finals, or the news, or the stress of whatever, right? We all have stress. And so I think that the museum space is such a great place to really kind of tune that out and
That's
again,
cool.
take a break. So I see my work as an escape from that chaos. And then the outcome is also creating that escape for others.
Awesome. How about yourself, Emily? You see anything like, even with you were talking about those backpacks and the what'd you call it, tactile, or whether that's somebody that's come into the museum or yourself with an exhibit.
I think I really enjoy the moments where maybe we're hosting a big event. For a couple of years, we were hosting Hot Dog Day, because one of our works in our collection is a print of a bridge that's made of a hot dog.
I'm really sad I missed that opportunity.
Yeah, it's really good. And we thought, it's in the summer, National Hot Dog Days in July.
Yeah.
Tell me what you do National Donut Day.
Yeah.
Yeah, we serve hot dogs, and I think there's a rainbow in the piece as well. Yeah. So we do an art activity based on rainbow. And families come, and there are experiences I've had where people are like, "This is my first time at an art museum ever." That's what I feel like is really great. Again, I think about why we're located where we are, where we have this experience where maybe people haven't ever been to an art museum or they find it scary, daunting. I think kind of coming back to the beginning of this episode where we just are talking about, being accessible to everyone. And I think breaking down those barriers and giving people a good experience that you do belong at an art museum, that art is for everyone. And I really love those moments, just meeting with people and they're like, I've never been to an art museum before. And that we get to be that first experience for them. And I hope it really instills a love for art for them, that they're now visiting museums, other places, or coming back to SUMA. Because like Jessica said, we're rotating the gallery 3-4 times a year. And there's usually multiple exhibits each time that you can come back just for a moment. You need a quiet afternoon. Or for a program, bring the whole family, that there's reasons to visit SUMA over and over again.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you both so much for coming on the podcast. Yeah. Emily Ronquillo, right? And Jessica Kinsey. So thank you. Appreciate it with the Southern Utah Museum of Art.
Yeah.
Not plural, not arts, art. And hopefully when you have some more of these rotating exhibits, we can have you on again sometime and talk about those exhibits.
Yeah, it'd be great. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, appreciate it.